Live from the depths of the K-hole, I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. My name is Leah Prime, and this is the Invisible Night School. For those of us just joining us, the Invisible Night School is a small consortium of lay researchers and scholars. We're basically here to have good conversation in good faith with lots of other smart people. You guys know the drill at this point. Without any further delay, I'm going to be bringing on my co-host for the evening. We have Nick.
What's up?
What's up? And Jay.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
Good evening. And unfortunately, we had a last minute cancellation. I think Campbell had way too much fun at the Taylor Swift concert, so he's taking the night off. Around the bottom of the hour, we'll be joined by Mike from Mind Escape, one of the podcasts I co-host pretty frequently. He'll be joining. We'll talk about creativity, psychedelics, consciousness, all that good stuff. Also give him a chance to basically plug and talk through his recent documentary that he put out with his co-host about psychedelics, consciousness, and UFOs, basically how they all connect together.
You're in that documentary, aren't you?
I am. And it's a very interesting thing. I was interviewed for it in the very early days of when I started live streaming and doing podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I go back and watch or listen to myself, I sound so nervous. Like so strung up because I was trying to collect and articulate my thoughts and also thinking, this is going to go in some documentary. Lots of people are going to watch this. And now it's like old hat. I'm like, oh yeah, there's lots of people like watching whatever I'm talking about. And I don't really think about it anymore. But it's cute getting a look at little baby Leah trying to articulate her thoughts on the relationship between DMT entities and aliens.
I try not to go back and re-listen to anything anyway, just to save myself any embarrassment.
I occasionally go back and listen to my very first podcast appearance just because it keeps me humble.
Maybe I should then.
Just
the
like
first few shows we did, I would always go back and listen because I wanted to get a sense of where I could improve. And also to get a sense of things that I was talking about that I wanted to revisit more in depth so I could like surface more insight instead of just constantly recycling the same ideas.
What were we talking about in the first ones? Like Calvine and stuff? Wasn't it that era?
Yeah, Calvine was our very first. We did a show on the occult and its relationship to ufology. We did a ghost show. We brought on Jack Brewer. I mean, we're only up to show 35, but I mean, dude, we've been doing this now for like 9 months.
Did you talk about Alan Greenfield and Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts on your UFOs and the occult show?
No, but we should have, because that's like, Lewis loves that book.
Okay.
Yeah, he's talked about it a number of times.
It's an interesting read. I mean, it basically, the TLDR is do magic and you'll keep the UFO knots away from you, including the men in black. And the Dero, who were underground, you know.
Dero, that comes from the Shaver Mystery.
Yes, because the whole back of that book is the eponymous Terry Rist, who was like a Vietnam Special Forces guy who's battling the Dero underground.
Now, this isn't the guy who was related to the Maury Island UFO incident, is it?
No.
Okay, because one of those witnesses turned out to be in a bit of contact with Ray Palmer and claimed that he fought a Dero or was shot by a Dero, maybe.
Yeah, that guy was shot, but this guy is really, this is like, I would watch the movie or play the video game of like hard-boiled Vietnam vets, like guys that were like the tunnel rats and stuff descending into hollow earth and, you know, blasting Dero with M16s and Lugers while their compatriots are melted by heat rays. And yeah, it's like, I mean,
it's pretty cool. I feel like in a strange way that this is tying into the kind of elephant in the room and the thing I feel a little obligated to discuss today.
Sure.
Because, I mean, we're talking about Dero and we're talking about Ray Palmer, who essentially invented this whole mythos that we now have another government whistleblower talking about. What are you guys' thoughts on this this new story that came out from Blumenthal and Leslie Kean? Again, just like 2017. What were you guys' takes on that?
Well, so let's take a step back and just talk through at an informational level what we're referencing.
Okay.
Basically, about 10 days ago, an article came out by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. They were also the authors of the 2017 article in the New York Times that basically centered Lou Elizondo. And their article that was published in the debrief showcases a former intelligence official, David Grush, who basically made claims that the US federal government maintains a UFO crash retrieval program, and that within the possession of the United States government are up to 12 spacecraft. He also went on to state that he had filed a complaint with the Office of the Intelligence Community Inspector General, an IG complaint, which is similar to, I believe, Elizondo's actions as well.
Yep.
So he's made all these pretty striking claims, very similar to claims that we've heard before.
Yeah.
And it was featured in this article in the debrief, so not exactly a paper of record for our current moment. This wasn't the Washington Post or the New York Times. And then was subsequently interviewed on Sunday night by Ross Coulthart, who is, I think, besides Keane and Blumenthal, probably the major journalist who's involved in reporting on these stories.
Yes, the UFO guy.
That's not George Knapp. Not George Knapp's not the major journalist.
No, it's not George Knapp. And I think the interesting thing to note about Coulthart, however you say it, whatever, is, you know, until his involvement, like, I don't want to say he was totally legitimate until UFOs, but he had a very strong reputation in journalism. I think he was primarily a music reporter and like culture reporter before delving into UFOs, and had something of an impressive pedigree journalistically. And so I think, you know, rightly or wrongly, he has done a lot to legitimize the subject in the court of public opinion, because he is entering and like investigating with this well-regarded background.
Yeah, well-regarded backgrounds are kind of a theme here.
Well,
what?
I would say well-regarded backgrounds, though, are a theme to a point, because the longer, like, this story kind of was breaking, I think, the last time I was on a couple of weeks ago with Garrett Kelly to start. And I feel on a long enough timeline, this is degenerating now as, like, the credibility is degenerating as, like, certain characters like Lou Elizondo rear his head, or things like this 1933 Italian UFO recovery that, like, I feel like, and I'll be honest, like, I have not bought into it enough to go check out the primary sources. Like, I know Grush did an interview, but when people are telling me, like, kind of the secondary sources, the TLDR through Twitter and other people, it sounds again to me like Grush is been exposed to, like, it's almost like the discredited Tim Good stuff. Like, it's very MJ-12, Eisenhower, Compact, like all of the stuff that we sort of consider BS now. But I think one of the things, Rob Christofferson, who does the Our Strange Skies podcast, said that he felt like 2017 was a reset moment, like the Thanos snap. And I think I see that with this, because, you know, post 2017, we have a ton of new people that were like ton of new UFO people. Like, just like the people tweeting, lots of tweeters that weren't like in this stuff or interested in it before. And it kind of also, like, guys like Knapp kind of like gave them, it was like somebody got the reanimator juice and like shot Knapp with the reanimator juice, and now
I think it's called adrenochrome.
He's no
reagent.
He's back with that. But unfortunately, as like a side effect, it's like everybody is credulous because ufology started in 2017. Right. So the stuff, like, and I think Grush might believe this, but there's kind of like at a certain point, like, buddy, come here. Like, no, like somebody needs to slip him a copy of Mirage Men. Be like, I mean, just kind of you know.
Well, the believers that are kind of like digging their heels on this and claiming that it is anything new are pointing to they're pointing to the credentials of this whistleblower, right? It's all the same old shit. Every UFO story we hear, he talked about Malmstrom with Salas, who in fact back in the 90s tried to do this exact same thing. It's all the same. It's all the same old stuff, but it's in a fancy new suit. And you see the people who are still trying to perpetuate this, or like drama, the people still beating their shields about this. That is their argument. Look at how shiny and fancy this suit is that we have on this old story, but it's still the same old story. No one seems to speak to the little bit of the claims that we're seeing. So what he's whistleblowing on isn't firsthand information. It was information given to him by sources. And we're slowly starting to realize who these sources are. Lou Elizondo, Jay Stratton, Eric Davis. So we know that this is related to like the Wilson Davis documents, right? Malmstrom, again, Malmstrom was a hoax. It was, I think, a hoax perpetuated to achieve kind of the same thing that's going on right now, which the term's going around there a lot, and I agree with it. This is a reboot of 2017. It's the same cast of characters putting forth a story, trying to get media legitimacy. And I think that, like, that's the overall goal. I don't know, like seeing people on TV with ties say the word UFO, because no evidence yet is being given. So what are we supposed to do?
I think, again, like, I think there's a distinct possibility that Grush got kind of roped into this and believes all of it, and isn't a guy that's familiar with any of this stuff. I also think when you're talking about like the shining credentials, not to discredit the man, but Richard Doty has credentials. Like I could say Richard Doty is like, well, he was in, Air Force intelligence, and he was in this, and he's like, we have this very I don't know, we're like playing a little bit of select a spook, because it's like, I don't like these guys when they do stuff I don't like, but I really like them when they do stuff I do like. And I'm not saying that again, as we're on a timeline, we'll see what this guy's like service record is like. We'll see what his real background is like. We'll see.
Does that matter?
It does. Here's what I think. I personally think it matters a lot when you're determining. You have to determine the overall credibility of the person based on the historical record of their actions, rather than their established title. Okay, I think like one of the things, again, like going back to, we were talking about Bob Lazar at a point. Like I was talking a little bit of smack a month ago about Bob Lazar on Twitter, and two people popped up, and the first one said, well, he must know engineering, he must be for real if he built those rocket cars. And I'm like,
I'm not so convinced of that, as someone who built a lot of Estes rocket kits. I'm like sort of the engines.
Well, I'm sort of like my sweet summer child. My house is full of electronics I've built, but that does not make me like a microelectronic engineer or anything. Like I'm just like, it's like a yeehaw thing. And then another person, I guess, and this is again kind of what I said, like the wanting to believe thing was immediately like, no, Lazar is for real, and like the conspiracy has covered up his credentials, and here's a bunch of stuff that I'm like, I'm not reading this, but it's like, here's a bunch of stuff about how that happened. So there is a certain point, I think, where like, and also, again, I take another example of this, not calling this guy a whistleblower at all, but the Discord leaks. Okay, the Discord leak, we have the right wing rush out to say this guy is a patriot and he's doing this, and we found out that he's like a deranged right wing, like racist, sociopathic weirdo. And a lot of what establishes like your credibility in these sectors is like, it's basically like they're looking for good Mormon boys, which means like you've never smoked the devil's lettuce or said any bad words about like Uncle Sam. But other than that, like you could have any set of beliefs and be up to anything otherwise. So I don't know. We just don't.
Yeah.
We don't know the guy. I also think, and this is going. I also think there's actually at this point there's a lot of UFO weirdos that work for the federal government because again they don't screen for that.
Right.
There sure are, and they're all friends with this guy. It seems like. I personally don't think who the guy is matters, because he's just relaying what he was told. He worked for he was on the UAP task force, correct? Under Stratton. He went looking for this stuff, and according to his account, he was approached. So I'm presuming this was. It's a lot like when Dr. Nolan says he's approached by the CIA, but what he means is he was approached by Kit Green.
Mm-hmm.
I think Grush was approached by, all these people orbiting him. George Knapp and Corbell, I think, met him about a year ago. Lou Elizondo, Eric Davis, all of these people who I do get the impression that they do believe what they're talking about, at least to an extent. I mean, we know that Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal are UFO people, and they believe what they're saying. Their story isn't necessarily 100% the truth, but they're crafting it. They think that the means justify the end, right? So they think that, like with the 2017 story, that was not an accurate description of OSAP or what they were doing on Skinwalker Ranch. And they knew that. And they deliberately left those bits out of the story to kind of craft a more credible narrative. I see that is happening here again. They keep, like I said, they keep talking about how credible this man is and, his service record and all these things. And I think all that's kind of a distraction because what's he saying? He's saying that beings are coming here from another dimension and killing people, right? That's one of the claims.
Yeah.
That how many crashes do we have? 12 UFO crashes?
Over 13.
12,
okay.
Yeah.
Mick West made a really interesting point that, like, you think about how many plane crashes we have here on Earth a year, like 1-2 a year, but we have, thousands and thousands of planes in the sky at any moment, every day. These advanced aliens that are coming here have like a worse safety record than us somehow. These things are constantly.
I have a thing to say about this though, which is if we take a step back from this idea that it's the Greys can't control their flying saucers and they just keep crashing into like rural Nevada. What I'm inclined to think or believe is if you do, how do I put this? The framing I would approach this with, and again, my standard Leah disclaimer of let's engage with ideas we don't necessarily agree with or believe, but like actually talk about things.
All right, engage me.
Yes. Nick, I'm about to engage you, man.
Let's go.
This idea that these crashes are actual deliberate control mechanisms that are meant to introduce and sway and compel the trajectory of humanity or particular parts of humanity in a very specific direction.
Yeah, this is the valet thing, right?
Yeah, this is the valet thing. This is kind of the Jacques Vallée, but also a little bit John Keel. But this idea that these are very deliberate and intentional insertions of disruptive events into human history meant to compel the progression or trajectory of humanity towards a particular outcome or with a particular teleology in mind. And that it is very much a trapping of being a human that we just are like, man, that sucks. They can't fly their flying saucers, right? When it's actually something much larger going on in terms of intervening in humanity.
Well, let me ask you this. Since a lot of these crashes that we all know in the lore and what is still being pushed happened nearly 80 years ago, what do you suspect that intervention achieved in any way?
Sure. You know it's a really good question. I'm just going to answer totally off the cuff. There's definitely arguments about introducing or seeding humanity with new technology. I saw Duncan made a mention of this because that's always been Bigelow's theory. That's also something you heard from Philip Corso the day after Roswell. Like this introduced basically like microcomputing, fiber optics, etc. But so I would actually go a step further or a step into the more abstract, which is what it has done as well is it has sparked the popular imagination in very interesting ways that other events have not. And that opening of the mind, or that opening of the public imagination, in turn has a ripple effect in terms of our own innovation, both in straight creativity and also in technology. So like, as these ideas, basically, it's it's kind of like the opposite of Mark Fisher's thesis in capitalist realism, where capitalism basically strictures and makes brittle the creative impulse because it prevents the consideration of anything outside of capitalism.
Right.
This is like the reverse. Like, this introduces a more rich ground for innovative and creative thought that otherwise would have been maybe not emerged organically.
I think that's interesting because, like, you and I have both seen, just in the stuff that we've talked about, that this UFO phenomenon kind of comes after our creativity and innovation. You know, we come up with these concepts of like life on Mars until we get out there. We we did that whole thing on vehicle interference, which someone mentioned in the chat. I mean, we saw kind of the cultural roots where those came from. So it's almost like these innovations and stuff precede them, in my opinion. So I disagree with you completely.
Right. No, this is good though, right? Like, this is making me think about this in a new way.
I think the other issue for me is this goes back to my whole like nobody knows anything thing. It's great to say great to say like we had like the aliens gave us the microwave oven, until you start getting into like, unless you're like a big enough nerd to like read about how these technologies evolved, because you're like, reading the history of the computer, like Wikipedia entry. I got that Bill Rose book on flying saucer shaped aircraft finally. And
Cool.
Bill's thing was that he thinks, again, that actually it was like the other way, like the UFO phenomenon seized the imagination of so many people that these guys were like, let's try to make this work. Like, let's try to make that we could do. But on the other hand, it was like nobody could. Like, there's a million, there's a bunch of saucer shaped craft that never, like, that's not the predominant thing. Other things, I think the thing that's been getting me lately is what in the like the mythos of this we discard and what we ignore. And I think like one of the discard things. So I had a weird brain fart and was thinking just out of the blue about Glenn Campbell and the Groom Lake Desert Rat early like last week. And actually,
explain
it's really
to people
weird.
what the Groom Lake Desert Rat is.
There was a guy who was a prominent figure in ufology in the like early to mid 90s. His name was Glenn Campbell. He lived in Rachel, Nevada, which is right out by Area 51. And he was involved in this it was a listserv newsletter. For those of you, it's kind of a pre-web internet mailing list based thing where he would disseminate this stuff. He wrote a lot about Bob Lazar really early because he was out there when that stuff was happening.
And I assume had a big intersection with Art Bell, because Art Bell was out there and then also running like BBSs and After Dark.
And those guys, like Glenn passed away, I think 3 or 4 years ago. But he did this, and I think it ran for X number of issues. He moved it to the web eventually. But like one of Glenn's things was he allegedly had contact with another researcher who had worked on the same program that Lazar had, who was just going by the pseudonym J-Rod 2. And J-Rod 2, there was J-Rod 1, who was a legitimate gray in this tale,
and EBE, an extra biological entity. Art Bell covered a lot of those.
Yeah, he was an EBE, and he gave them a bunch of. He was working. They built a flight simulator for the sport model, but the flight simulator was really like it worked on the same physics. It was just on a big robot arm to train U.S. pilots to fly the Lazar sport model. And I was just thinking about this because when the reanimator juice kind of flowed through ufology and got to Bob Lazar, like I can't find anything about J-Rod 2. He'd probably be dead by now because he was in his 70s in like 1994 when Glenn was writing this. He could still be alive, but it seems unlikely. And it's like that's a discarded piece of this. Another like weird thing. Now, the one thing that has happened between a combination of this stuff and unfortunately with
One sec. Yeah, Jeff, EBE
yeah,
1 died June 18th, but where's EBE 2? That's what we're asking about.
yeah, straight to discredit this now discredited tweeter Whitley Strieber. We have like, I think one of the things that happens with all this stuff is the mythos paves over the evidence. The evidence being the reports of the sightings. I was at I think I told you guys this. I was at Small Town Monster Fest a weekend ago. So Stan Gordon is there. For those that don't know, Stan Gordon is a Pennsylvania UFO and Fortean researcher. He's still active. And there was a flap in the early 70s in Western PA that was a UFO flap, but also coincided with a lot of Bigfoot type creatures and general high strangeness. And one of the things that I realized, I'm reading Secret Invasion. This is Stan Gordon, and a lot of it, I don't want to say it's not dry, but it's not a narrative. He's publishing his, like, these are his reports. You're just flipping through, this happened. That this idea to visualize, like, I want to make a diagram of everything that he put out, because we have this very mythos-based idea of like the physical saucer craft, the gray alien, but it's like they're seeing torpedoes, they're seeing a flying antenna, they're seeing orange balls, they're seeing Bigfoots, they're seeing the ones that are 10 feet tall, ones that are 6 feet tall, ones that are stocky, ones that have really long arms, ones that are there's a tremendous, like, the variety of reported experience is vast. And I feel like the collective imagination on this is condensed into the Grays and Roswell and the ship. And I get slightly, I think it slightly goes back to the U.S. intelligence controlled official narrative, unofficial narrative of this. Like, and why I said Grusch matters is the reason, like, one of the things, and this is in, you'll guess that, Trickster and the Paranormal, they talk.
Oh my God, I know. I was waiting for that to come up here because it seems so salient. Why
Doty was picked. Okay, Doty was picked while he was approached to receive this information. This is hypothetical, but he was an F-up. Okay, he committed, said some errors, was censored for releasing some information, and was basically considered, once they got him in there, they're like, oh, this guy is unreliable. Like, Richard Doty is never going to move up in the world of intelligence, but he's useful for disseminating a story we want. And also, he kind of provides a layer of credibility, though, if you don't dig into that. So was that what you thought I was going to say, or are you thinking of something different, Leah, from Trickster?
Oh, I mean, honestly, I wasn't paying attention because I was messaging Mike, who's now backstage.
Absolutely.
To tell him we're talking about UFOs and myth. I'm going to get him added to the stream, and then I'd love for you to revisit what you were saying about Hansen's book. Hey, Mike.
Hello. Hey, what's going on?
Hey. So, Mike, I actually don't think you've ever met Nick and Jay, two of my co-hosts.
Nice to meet you.
I occasionally hang out with Mike on Mind Escape. And the other degenerates we associate with, and psychedelics, consciousness, all that fun stuff. And I'd been pestering Mike to come on the show for a while, even though I wouldn't characterize him as a UFO guy, which is a good thing.
Yes.
A very good thing. I still thought it'd be, especially as we're broadening what we're talking about, it'd be great to have him at the table to talk shop.
No,
we're still talking about Grush. Just so you know, we're still talking about Grush and UFO mythos.
Well, I'll just give you my take, which I haven't even talked about it on my own.
Jump in and do it.
I haven't even talked about this on my own podcasts yet. Let me turn my volume down just a little bit here. So I'm not one of these people that's going to attack people and be like, oh, he's lying. Oh, they're lying. They're all lying. What I believe is that there's always this game of telephone playing, especially within the alphabets. and things get disseminated, whether they're true, whether they're false. Look at the Lazar stuff. Was he even part of that? Did he even elevate to the level of what this guy is, that he would have had access to all this stuff? And for me, it's like, that's not what's interesting about the phenomenon to me. That's why when you listen to our podcast, we don't talk about like the talking heads on UFO Twitter or whatever's happening, because that doesn't, I'm more interested in how it affects and plays off of our mind and our consciousness. And I don't feel like many people talk about that in the more realistic way that it should be talked about. A lot of it's woo, which is fun. I mean, let's all speculate, let's all have fun, but it's, at some point we all have to analyze what is possible in this reality and what's not. I don't want to waste my time. I've done a lot of research, put a lot of time into this. I also understand the mind really well, and I understand how easy it is to believe things that you want to believe via confirmation bias and different cognitive biases and stuff like that. So my take on him is we'll wait and see what happens. I don't. Is it possible? Sure, anything's possible. I'm not against it. If they have that, awesome. Like, all these people, all these activists.
Accurate, this would fucking rule.
Yeah, all these activists that have put all this time into it. Cool. And look, I have friends. I have Toby and Shane and Chris Wolford, and all these people are into the secrecy aspects of that, and that's all wonderful. And I would never come at them about any of that, because that's what they want to look into. That's what they're interested in. Just like I'm more interested in the mind and the philosophical and the consciousness aspects of it. However, there's this great quote that I always use from Pericles, which is, time is the wisest counselor, because it's true. Time will tell. And if it doesn't, then it's just going to be another 80 years or 160 years.
We've been waiting on
whatever
time
it is. I will say, though, I think some people get lost in the sauce and think that there's these all-knowing, intelligent people out there. And really, a lot of these people are just regular people that maybe went to basic level college and then entered the military, or went right from high school into the military and then built up this career through the military. So it's not like, and no offense to any of those people, but it's not like they're Einstein or, Oppenheimer or anything like that. And people always talk about secrecy and stuff like that. My take on that is, the most secret project we've ever had is the Manhattan Project. And we had spies that were involved in Canada and the US. Niels Bohr, when he came over, even announced it like in the paper, I'm coming to work on this big project, and like they told Stalin about it. Like, there was all these things, like it was secret, but it wasn't that secret. Everybody knew what was happening. Also, Germany was doing the exact same thing. So Heisenberg and all those physicists they were basically friends with all the people in the US from their younger years in Europe and going to college and stuff like that. But war breaks out, people take sides, people are forced to take sides, whatever the case may be. So again, that's the most secret program we've ever had, and there were still spies and leaks and all this.
And this is before cell phones, even.
Right. So am I saying it's impossible? No, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying, if I had to bet on it, I would bet that we don't have craft. But that's not to say that I might be wrong either. I'm open to the possibility of being wrong. So
I think when I make considerations about this, and I'm generally at the point where I personally don't have any meaningful opinions or conclusions drawn about Grush or about Elizondo, other than these are bit players in a very interesting and compelling tapestry. One of the things I have warned, because I think I've become something of the de facto UFO guy in my social circle and on Twitter, I've warned a number of people with this resurgence of interest that nobody has meaningful answers. You'll encounter a lot of different theories, but that anyone who's making proclamations or conclusive declarations about the nature or dynamic of this subject or its causes or what it actually is, they should basically be disregarded. But getting back to my initial point, look, you do not, and I've said this before, you do not have to be a conspiracy theorist to know that there is a long and storied history of counterintelligence operations in this country that have been deliberately and intentionally inserted into all parts of the cultural, social, and political milieu in order to shape opinion, to break apart communities, etc. And even if we are in the ufology community, I would say especially in the fringe areas, like the fringe stuff that you see on UFO Twitter, right? Like I'm not talking about Michael Swords. I'm not talking about Jan Aldrich. I'm talking about like the real overlap in the Venn diagram between ufology and like true deep state conspiratorial thinking. The government's paying attention to all of this.
Yeah.
The federal agents pay attention to this because even though it's not really a violent subculture, it's still a deeply conspiratorial one. And I certainly don't think it's above the actions of counterintelligence to insert itself in this community, deliberately attempt to fracture it, or to basically use it to test and measure different networks to determine basically how information is disseminated among complex systems.
I mean, I would point out, Leah and I met through Twitter Spaces a long time ago.
Everyone important in my life came from
over
Twitter.
a year
Like,
ago.
let's be real.
So I was doing a lot of spaces, and I can tell you there's people doing multiple voices. There's people, again, whether they're mentally ill or just playing a role or whatever they're doing, it's pretty clear to anybody who's somewhat intelligent what's going on here, is that somebody's taking notice for whatever reason. Now, aside from that, I would say that
Wait,
I hope
stop
that
it. You got to post a pic.
I hope that that's the case too, because we want, we don't want crazy people doing crazy things, right? So, is where we don't want the big brother aspect of it. I do think it is necessary in some regard because, I mean, there's radicalized people out there. And so, yeah, and I think it's interesting to point out, you mentioned the conspiratorial aspect of it. It's interesting that there's a lot of people that are activists that are anti all other conspiracies except for this conspiracy.
Right.
Which
they're
is like,
still
we make
pro-vax,
this.
They're still
Yeah,
exactly.
So I find that very fascinating from watching UFO Twitter the last 5 years.
This is arguably, though, the only hopeful conspiracy.
Yes, that's true.
So
it is an optimistic.
I mean, there have been real ones, but again, why I've made it a part of my philosophy to not waste my time on it. I only want to learn about things I can know. I feel like even most conspiracies, if you look at them, there's collusion, but I don't think a lot of the people in the past have been intelligent enough to know what they were doing, as opposed to it was just in their best interest to collude against, and I think that's what these big corporations, I don't think there's one dude like a Mr. Burns at the top saying, oh, we're going to poison all these people, or we're going to kill, I don't think it's as simple as that. I think
not George Soros.
Yeah. It's like, how can we maximize profit? How can we maximize this? And then it trickles down and then somebody gets hurt. So
yeah, it's capitalism, stupid, right? Like, that's what's really
all
at the
these
heart
things
of
are
this.
far more complex. Yeah, far more complex than just right, wrong, all that. But yeah, so that's my take on it. Again, I will point out that I believe there's something to the UFO phenomenon. We just made a documentary about it. I wouldn't have spent that much time and effort, and I wouldn't have talked about it on my podcast the last 5 years if I thought, and started a separate podcast on the side with Toby and Shane, if I didn't feel like there was something to that. I have a different approach. Again, I think it's connected to consciousness in the mind, whether it's some sort of future glimpse or maybe an artifact or something having to do with all of that. Whereas they think that there might be more of a physical thing that's landed or whatever. So again, that's just my take. We'll see what happens with if there's any hearings or future stuff with that. It makes me not want to look into this.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I've progressively gotten less interested in the government stuff over the last 5 years than I was. Not that I was some diehard, I got to know every, MJ12 and this and Blue Book and all, and I do know a lot of those, but I'm just saying, like, that was never my thing. So, again, I'm more fascinated at the mind and how I think the UFO thing is just part of the bigger picture. I've had my own experiences. I have talked to people that are the most salt of the earth people that why would they lie or make it up? And I have some of my dearest friends, have seen and experienced things. So, but that, I think, again, I'm able to parse that away from, or separate it from all the government stuff. I don't think a lot of people are. So
Fantastic.
Have we had enough of this Grush stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna jump right in and ask Mike about the documentary he just worked on, and I bring that up because I think it's a wonderful segue from UFO disclosure, Grush, etc., into some more numinous stuff around consciousness, psychedelics, and human experience.
Pause. I want everybody to be on the same page here, because consciousness is a word that gets thrown around a lot, like quantum, and I want to know, like, what is your take on consciousness? What do you mean by it? How do you view it? How would you explain it?
I mean, are you asking Leah? Or are you asking me?
All of us here, just so.
If I can simplify it for myself, which is there's two ways to look at this. For me, it's either idealism, everything's created from mind, or or it's just consciousness doesn't even exist. It's illusionism. It's a byproduct of biology. I don't believe that, but I think that those are the two schools of. If you listen to most modern philosophers, they actually side with the second camp more, which is
what we experience as consciousness is kind of an illusion. It's kind of a model that we're creating, and we it's millions of little subconscious decisions being made before we even realize we're making a decision that gives the appearance of we're parsing through a problem in our head with dialogue, even though that has been that's kind of that whole, like, does free will exist or not? I was just making sure, because I mean, consciousness can be as simple as, like, self-awareness, and it can be as expansive as, like, the ether, so I want to make sure
that's important too. Self-awareness, I think, is a huge like, when did we first look into the lake, reflection, and notice ourselves, or when did we start to notice ourselves as a separate entity, kind of a thing. I think that's important. I think that is part of consciousness, but I think it's a part of it. I mean, just even having my son now, who's over a year and a half, and just him looking in the mirror and just watching that connection and that interplay is very interesting. And just watching, because you don't remember it, like growing up, I don't remember ever looking in the mirror when I was a baby or a kid or whatever like that. So what does that mean to what we are and what we're doing? And there's a great documentary, I think it's on Hulu or maybe Netflix, I don't know. It's the guy that did My Octopus Teacher, but he follows around chimps. I recommend that. That's actually pretty interesting. But yeah, just looking at all that stuff, like, what is consciousness? Why are we so different? What separates us from the animal kingdom in the way that we perceive ourselves to be separate from the animal kingdom, and things like that?
I don't have a real firm definition on it. I mean, I would say it's the capacity for self-reflection and symbolic thought, but I don't have a stance on mind versus matter that's real firm. I tend, on an intuitive level, I do believe that there is a reality, a physical reality that exists regardless of whether we're here or not. But I also realize that the reality that we live in is sort of governed by our ability to perceive and process it. So those aren't exactly
our own filters that we're using.
I don't want to see radio waves. That would make it really hard to go downstairs and get a donut.
True.
I mean, I think of consciousness as being defined in a highly contextual fashion, right? Like, I think of just the sort of immediate materialist consciousness of I am awake and experiencing my environment in a way that feels conscious to me, like it is deliberate and intentional, versus, in a ketamine state or in anesthesia or in sleep, this feels less like a deliberate, intentional experience. But I think the way I think of it is almost like a Cartesian plane. Like there's 4 quadrants. Like one quadrant is individual consciousness is an individual experience, and it is strictly an interpretation of material surroundings, and the material surroundings are reality. And there's like individual experience, consciousness is individual, but it's idealism. It's our brain reconstructing. Like this is like what Donald Hoffman talks about, like what we see and engage with, the qualia we experience is really like an interface, the same way like a computer screen is an interface with the inner electronics of a computer. And then the other two quadrants would be consciousness is something that is actually collective, and the idea of it being an individual thing is just an artifact of like our mental processing, that consciousness does not exist internally. It's something like a field, or it exists outside of ourselves and we just sort of receive it. Or there's this sort of same collective consciousness that's idealism as well, that like we're all just kind of collectively dreaming reality into existence, or engaging with this kind of interface that is but a poor or abstract representation of what is actually occurring.
I mean, like in a way, I mean that the last thing you described is kind of true when we look at things like UFOs, like myths, things like that.
Egregores, right? Yeah, we all collectively dream things into existence. And Jay, I know I have asked you a million times the term for this, but it's this idea that like you can seed importance or value. Marketers do it all the time. Like they basically try to artificially generate like buzz around something with the hopes that it catches on subsequently with people, right? Like if you have enough people
I mean it's a real basic principle of advertising. And I actually the thing that I look at it was a real good example of it was VR glasses, like back a couple years ago. And I know that's kind of still hanging on. No, but like right back, Google Glass, the ones that you could put, all of the ones that you could put a phone in, you like snap it down and put a phone in.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Right.
Because like we marketed those, not we, but like the advertising industry marketed those as they were like the Christmas gift you had to get. And the process is sort of like you make the perception of reality soft, where you're like, okay, this is a valuable thing and you want it. And then reality kind of hardens up again later after that effect has happened. Now, I do think this is, again, though, to me, why there is like sort of a baseline reality, because those sucked and nobody, and they're like a thing that exists. They were regifted and then they're in everybody's closet on like the top shelf in the back.
They're filling up Goodwill.
You can't like, you can't like, you can convince everybody to buy them and think they're good for a while, but if they're not actually good and fun to use and like a cool thing, then they don't take in. And I think, again, like everything we've seen in tech, we're in this like terrible cycle of tech hucksterism where we had blockchain, crypto, NFTs, then we had like
trains,
VR, AR, the metaverse, and now we're in AI as the language model thing. And I also say that like baseline reality has to exist, because we're not all like, why do we all decide to dream this? Like, what do I got hands? Like, you know what I mean? I say that. I always sometimes I think about that. The collective dream sucks. But no, there's a lot of like, there's a lot of ways we can shape perception, like in the short term with those like psychological techniques that advertising uses. And a lot of them are very like, it's very easy, it's very elementary stuff, but the whole process still, there has to be some substance in the end. And even if the substance is we all convince you to do this because like we all believe in it. Product-based stuff is a little bit tricky like that, because we can still market products based on like personal insecurity, whether or not
psychographics, excuse me.
But
these are all just fads. I mean, even the AI thing, like it's a chatbot. It's literally curating
Right.
things from the internet. It's not even thinking. Like people are really just not aware of what these things really are.
Actually, I read the
There's
best.
a lot of Dunning-Kruger stuff going on with AI. I can't tell
What's
you how
more
many
interesting?
Twitter
Quantum
spaces I
computing.
see.
Quantum
Quantum
computing.
computing is fascinating.
Now that's
I mean,
interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing you're talking about, Leah, is psychic driving, where we just
Yeah,
expose
that's what
you
I was
to
thinking of.
you just expose you
Yeah.
to the message to the point where you're like, I cave and I believe this. Like I no longer
Yes.
like question it, and I'm buying my
Yes.
$90 VR glasses that I can stick my
Mhm.
iPhone in.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
think at the core too of psychic driving, I mean, this shows up a lot in like taste, but taste is acquired by exposure. So what I mean by this is that if you're repeatedly exposed to something like a food or a drink or an experience, even if you don't like it initially, after you've been exposed to it a number of times, pretty frequently, if you don't become ambivalent, you'll actually like it. Right? Like this is like how people learn to develop a taste for things like black coffee. Nobody really likes black coffee at the start, but you just kind of make a deliberate decision because, you know, you like how it makes you feel, you like the
Yeah,
ritual,
it's like
whatever.
all those assholes that like wine. Yeah.
I actually
Wow.
those
That's a
though.
real spicy
Actually,
hot
I'll say
take I've never had
alcohol in
before.
general.
Alcohol
like,
in
it's the worst.
general, right?
It's the
Alcohol's
worst.
a good one.
It's the
It's
worst
disgusting. It's the
compound,
worst
and
drug.
everything tastes like shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll drink
Yeah,
a
booze
cold
sucks.
beer on a hot day once in a while, and it's refreshing. Other than that,
Yes.
nah.
get lost.
Well, I did read, Nick, unfortunately, and this is me too, that people with more sociopathic personality traits enjoy bitter flavors
Oh.
more, just
Interesting.
on a genetic level. This is me too. Like some people really do like that stuff, but I know what you mean. It's if our society didn't, okay, I do think that like at a certain point, like alcohol has value because it lets us like let people survive bad drinking water in certain situations.
Exactly.
It also is not like it's the payoff. Like alcohol may taste bad, but being intoxicated
It's fun as
is
hell.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that like that seems to be like the like a persistent human trait is what I'm trying to say.
That
What we
sociopathic
have,
is interesting. Do you think it's because they believe they can convince themselves that they like something that they don't like because they're a
Right.
sociopath?
I think it might be genetic on the level of the like the cilantro gene.
Yeah.
Like it's just like, oh, by the way, like if you genetically, whatever your brain structure is or whatever governs this chemical balance leans you towards that, you also are like, I like bitter, like I like it. Like I don't know on that, but a lot of the things we do, I think like a societal ritual enforces it. Drinking is a really good example. Like drinking also has value because it's like I have to go like bond with my coworkers over drinks, and if I don't, this is actually something I have experienced, like being ostracized by the office because you don't want to
don't drink.
Go, I'm like I don't drink
I'm just like anything else I'll do, but alcohol, like I'll have a couple cocktails every now and then. I love the feeling of having a couple beers, but the anxiety the next few days.
I think the thing though that is interesting.
So bad.
One of the things that's interesting to me about you though is your approach to the psychonaut experience and the drug experience, because I eschewed a lot of this as a kid. Like when I was young.
Oh, so did
basically
I. I didn't smoke pot
till
I was 21.
Yeah, but a lot of it was available was just like of questionable provenance and like effect. You know, like you're gonna get like LSD from some random guy, and is it like any good or
you
gotta hang out with the hippies,
like,
bro. You're hanging out with the wrong crowd.
I think that's
cannot imagine having an intense psychedelic experience before like I'd come into adulthood in a substantial fashion. Like the idea to me of like having a major psilocybin experience at like 17, it like horrifies me in a lot of different ways. And I'm not saying that to confer judgment on anyone. Oh no, I didn't get in. I was always very interested.
Yeah, I was. I mean, I've been doing this shit since I was 13
yoga and
smoking
breath
weed
work and
and
stuff like that. No,
mushrooms.
but I didn't smoke pot till I was 21. I mean, I was ROTC. I didn't give up on my dream of being an astronaut until I was literally 20 years old. Like, I went to engineering school. I was ROTC on a scholarship, the whole thing. So for me, it's almost inextricably connected to spiritual practice and like self work and transpersonal experience. It's never been in the realm of recreational experience for me. And I say, like, when I talk about this, it's not with judgment. Like, I know people use these as tools all the time in different ways. But the other thing I was going to say, going back to tastes, I have a lot of tastes or proclivities towards like serious acquired taste things. Like, I love salted black licorice. I love Marmite. Marmite's one of my favorite things. I love really hoppy, not necessarily beers, but like hop teas. I like bitter and like herbal things. And I mentally always connect it to being really into type 2 fun, which is like shorthand for being like, I fucking love to suffer, right? Like, I love to backpack in the woods and not shower for a week. I like, I like hard workouts. Like, right? Yeah, I know this is deranged shit, and that's also why I like salted black licorice that smells like a cat
Unhinged.
box.
I
when
do
you
like
open the
black
bag.
licorice, but the rest of that's unhinged.
Yeah, no, I
You guys are
know.
all serial killers.
I know.
I don't think it's unhinged. I don't know if your whole life was like that or you're balancing out.
No, I've always been like this. I've always been like, and it's weird because I'm not competitive. I'm really not type A. I just like intense shit. I like intensity. That's really what it is.
Spicy food.
Love spicy food.
Okay.
Like really spicy, not like blast furnace spicy, but like complex spicy, like what you see in Szechuan cooking. Like, I want like little beads of sweat to form at my hairline.
Do you know this is though? Okay, so taking this back right now to our discussion of the nature of consciousness, we are very. This is one of the things I think about a lot with this. We're very, when we're having these interactions, like we're very fragmented, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, we really express a wide, there's like a wide spectrum of taste and experience, which again, I don't know. I don't know if that plays into the, it's difficult for me, I guess, there's a limit of my imagination to imagine a collective mind fragmenting itself into like, it's like we're all little Mandelbrot sets kind of forming out and forming into these complex shapes and disintegrating. I don't know. It's difficult for me to conceive of that. Like, I think, again, though, I feel like one of the things that I hear, I've not experienced this, but hear repeatedly is, the higher, what we call in the vernacular, like the higher stages of consciousness, you feel that like oneness and connected.
Yeah, non-duality.
Yeah, and it's like, have you guys had the non-duality? Is it as good as the black licorice?
Yes.
It's far.
I mean, I've had it.
I hate black
go ahead,
licorice, so anything can beat that. But yeah, all you Jägermeister lovers, all that shit's nasty.
God, Jaeger.
I like the Jägermeister.
So
What about Malort?
3 years ago, I had a psilocybin experience where, so how, have you ever tripped and looked at a part of your body where felt like it was like disconnected?
Yeah, like
look at your hand and like, oh, is this even part of me or something like that? Like, that's actually a common.
Ketamine does this, right? This intense association.
So I had the opposite effect where I felt like I was part of I felt like I was connected to everything, and I couldn't understand how in that moment, how nobody else could feel that or ever knew that we are so, I don't know how to explain it. It's like I said, it would be like feeling like missing something, but it's all there. It's really hard to explain. I can't really, I mean, that's why they say it's like ineffable, or you can't really describe psychedelic experiences. But that was the experience that I was just connected to everything, and it was so obvious at the time and so groundbreaking in my own mind. And maybe that's an illusion too, I'm open to that, but it felt real. And even afterwards, I could see what I was thinking, that I felt, I don't know. I just felt like more at peace about things after that experience. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the non-duality, I felt that before. But I also wonder about creativity a lot too, and individuality, and can we separate ourselves from this one thing or this greater thing? Because I don't think anything truly is original. Music's not original, especially now. You look at content, it's not original. Whether we're talking about UFO Twitter or posting or whatever, it's everybody posts the same shit. Everybody repeats off of each other. Everybody's
It's
basically
monoculture too.
yeah. I mean,
All the communication mediums we use basically incentivize this convergence towards one way to speak, one way to communicate, one way to think.
Well, human society, though, regardless of the socio-political context, has always organized itself like that. Like you have, like we, you know, like in a capitalist society, you got to go with what pays the bills. Like you got to make the content that's going to connect. This is actually something when I teach graphic design, I try to explain this to my students, that a lot of people make the mistake of pursuing a creative career, creative education, in the idea that there's personal fulfillment to be had. And that personal fulfillment is actually going to come because somehow they're going to get paid to express themselves creatively on an individual level, and people are going to pay for that. I'm like, that only happens to like 10 people. There's like 10 people every decade. And usually it's a easy, like I say, the easy mode. The guy I always point out to is Coop, the alternative rock art guy who was really big poster artist in the 90s. The Zaftig Devil Women. That's the guy.
Oh yeah, I know.
Right? Okay.
Right, like
but
the rat
like,
rod, like
but like
with, the chicken
but it's
like
glass.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Extremely elemental, like it's like sex cells. There you go. It's good. Okay.
Right. It's
I also
Proust, right?
I also though wonder. I deeply wonder about the creative lives of artists. Like, is that guy? Does he get up every day and is he still thrilled that after like 30 years he can do that? Like that's his thing, or is he like, I have a child I have to pay with, and I'm gonna if it was just me, I'd stick a gun in my mouth before drawing another devil woman, but I gotta pay the bills.
I mean, as a musician, I can tell you, people get sick of it. People get sick of playing the same songs. I used to get sick. I mean, I wasn't even out there touring necessarily. We were just playing like local gigs around Chicago, Detroit, whatever. Yeah, I mean, you get sick of playing certain things and you just do it because you feel like you have to or whatever. So, but my point wasn't about what you're talking about. My point was more along the line of, can you feel or figure out how to truly be creative in the way that you cut off the tie of that causal line that led you to the point of where you're at, and you're actually like, tell me something completely original right now. Any one of you can you tell me something that you thought of that's 100% original of thought that you feel like, you know, nobody else has ever thought about it before?
Paranormal Championship Wrestling.
I guarantee you somebody's thought about that.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, one of the things though about creativity in that context. So this is, have you read, and I'm not going to be able to say the guy's name because it's a tremendously long Czech name, I believe. The guy that was the guy that discovered the flow state.
Oh yeah.
You can do it. I believe in you, Leah.
It's actually Hungarian. It's Mihai. I need to look it up, but I can.
I'm looking at it right now, and I can't say it.
Shinsek Mihai. Yeah, it's Hungarian.
Shinsek Mihai. So when Shinsek Mihai talks about creativity, he argues that there's very few people. Like true creativity is original thought processes, and it's like those breakthrough moments that come for a select few individuals that move our society forward. And one of the things that's actually interesting to me about this, because I relate, and he talks about personal creativity. Like if you're sitting in you're me and you're sitting around, you're like, Paranormal Championship Wrestling, that's a cool idea. Or you're working on an individual piece, personal creativity is different. What's interesting to me though, when he talks about that is, there's a frequent level of like, not like it comes from within, but it comes from without, or it's like the divine spark, or this connection to the higher consciousness.
Yes.
Although in my personal life, like little like minor bit of research writing and stuff that I have done, I also though relate the expression of personal creativity when you're in that flow state to psi phenomena
Hmm.
that is the dowsing reflex.
Yes. Oh, this is. I
So
love when you talk
So
about
there's
this because I
definitely
use the
something
term
there.
dowsing all the time.
Um,
Yes,
through,
Mike, I want to hear your thoughts on where
Okay.
creativity comes from. So,
well, I was just gonna say, I mean, I don't, from a waking or day-to-day consciousness state, I don't think we can achieve what you're talking about. Or if people can, it's very few. Or it's something you have to cultivate throughout your whole life to
mhm.
not do these predictive patterns that everybody does. I have had, again, high dose psilocybin experience in the dark where I was shown that that is the realm of creativity and things can be pulled from that realm and brought into this realm if you know what you're doing. Most people, as you mentioned, will take these things recreationally. They won't think twice about it. I'm sure a lot of those people have had amazing breakthroughs or amazing experiences. They just don't know what to do with it, or they don't have the tools or the faculties to facilitate a way to, come up or, actually make that invention or write that song or whatever the case may be. So, um, I'm not advocating that everybody does psychedelics, but I do think it is one of the best tools we have to get outside of our own consciousness and our own way and peer beyond the veil and see what potentially doors could open up that we're at a standstill right now. We're at a standstill in physics. We're at a standstill um, in medicine in a lot of ways. And even though there's breakthroughs in these fields and things like that, it's very slow compared to our technology. And I feel like this is dangerous because I feel like we're entering a phase where technology is expanding exponentially and our biology isn't keeping up with it, and it's not going to be able to keep up with it much longer, and we have to figure out a way. And then this isn't like a doomsday, oh my god, the robots are taking over or anything like that. I just mean that, like, where we are going, our minds are going further than where our bodies are going right now. And if we don't marry those two or close that gap, I don't think that I don't know. I don't think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a weird future, to be honest.
Mhm. I mean, this is always one of the things I've heard discussed a lot in spaces around ethical technology and humane design is this idea that our technological progress is outpacing by a very, very wide margin any of our ethical and sort of cultural capacities to understand this. And I would also say, like, I mean, one of the I see lots of Twitter spaces hosted to talk about AI by lots of people that functionally have no fucking idea of what AI even is
You
or
mean
how it works.
NFT
Yeah,
artists?
NFTs, AI as like I see it a lot in the UFO community. People talking about AI who have no functional knowledge of what AI actually is, and especially its limitations. Right, like for people who are not well versed with how large language models work or how computer vision works, like ChatGPT and Midjourney are functionally equivalent to magic, right? It's extraordinary, and they are extraordinary. They're incredibly powerful tools. They're very cool. They're very interesting. But we are only at the earliest edge of any kind of meaningful AI, and
People
this
are
is
already
already
getting
what it looks
sued
like. And this
for
is already what it
artwork.
looks like.
People are already getting sued for artwork being stolen. People are already getting sued for research being done, books
Mm-hmm.
written. Like, this is already happening. Like, again, these aren't these language modelers. They're not coming up with anything. They are taking things that are already on
Mm-hmm.
the internet and they are
And
putting
modeling
it in
them.
front of you, and you might not have heard of it and it might seem new
Yes.
or cool to you. But if you've
But
looked
it
into
doesn't mean
any
it's
of these fringe
conscious.
things, if you've read
Yes.
all the books that I've read, Leah's read, all these people have read, you would know most of this shit, but you don't. So sorry if I'm getting off on it. Read a fucking book. Okay.
Oh,
The way
dude, trust me. Yes.
the way
Agree.
we're describing AI here is kind of modeling it after other things makes me kind of almost circle back to what we were talking about before in creativity and inspiration.
Mhm.
And I'm kind of not to linger on that too long, but I'm kind of wondering how you distinguish, an original thought from
Well,
maybe one that is, inspired by like we were talking about earlier, a million different subconscious decisions that are from like a million different like subconscious influences throughout our lives. You know, how are we distinguishing this? How are we identifying these things as original thought?
I want to
You know
say
what I mean?
one
It
thing
makes you
about
think.
the
Oh, go ahead.
AI thing, though, and kind of what we're experiencing
Please.
when this ties in. And one of the things I do think, I do want to emphasize that difference between like the large, our Hungarian friends, like creativity writ large with an original idea and the expression of personal creativity, which can be individual to relative. Like we're all now immersed in culture to a degree that I don't think anybody's going to have an original idea. But one of the things that I do believe that everybody can access personal creativity and hone that, like what I consider the psi phenomena, hone the dowsing reflex to make intuitive decisions on your personal creativity. What I see in the world on the internet with all of this stuff is right now we don't have a society that values developing that skill set. We don't have a society that encourages people. One of the worst things about kind of STEM education, you're talking about the kind of the big science is gone, is we're really encouraging people to get an education that will benefit them in like a high paying job in the workforce. A lot of people are experiencing personal creativity for the first time in their lives using the language models, using the image generation things. And to them, it is a miracle. And that sort of speaks, I mean, that is a reflection, though, largely of the, Leah, you always talk about the, the epistemological crisis that we experience. That's a large part of that. It's like everybody is kind of doesn't have, their ideas are never valued. They never learn to express themselves visually or as writers or as musicians or anything. And now they have a magic machine that can bring that. It is bringing that out to them. And it might not be perfect as like somebody would compose their own work, but it's the first time they've ever been able to realize that urge. And that's why it is like, it's hard in a way. Like I feel a lot of sympathy for those people, because people like me that are like a professional creative, I'm like, this all sucks. This is all trash. Like, everything about this is trash, but like, it's also to them, they are now hanging their picture on the refrigerator, and it's like being able to realize that for themselves. And it's beautiful for them. It's just a disaster, like for culture writ large, except don't worry, it's going to implode. Because as more people generate more shitty content through language models and put it on the internet, and the language model learns from that, eventually it's just going to implode.
Like Multiplicity with Michael Keaton.
That's a fantastic. I love Michael Keaton. Just want to say my favorite actor.
Great.
I'm sorry, I digress.
Yeah, I mean, I think that creativity is one of those things where we all like to think we're original, but even when I know a couple people, like somebody posted something one time, they thought it was so original, and literally somebody retweeted like 5 other people below that had said the exact same thing. So, so it's like,
but was it creative to them? Was it unique to them?
Well, but that brings me back to my point. So you mentioned earlier, Nick, you said, how would we know if it's truly original or creative? And I think that, look throughout history, like people fight, why are there pyramids all over the world? Well, archaeologists will tell you that burial mounds progressively got more, mastabas got more intricate, and then they slowly started to build up, and then the triangle is the most likely shape to go therefore next, stuff like that. I do believe there is a collective consciousness, though. So there's different vibes to that. What I just mentioned, there's people that'll say, oh well, ancient people got around a lot more, which we know now is actually kind of true. There'll be people that'll say what I just said, that it's just the next logical step of consciousness and thinking. And then I think that you look at that study with rats and how rats are able to signal across different like continents to other rats somehow. different traits and things. You can look this up. I don't know how they do it or what it is, if it's just some sort of
I haven't heard of that
genetic signaling or something, but it's like one group of rats starts doing something and then the other group instinctually knows how to do that. I mean, then you can get woo.
It's like
you
the
can
100th monkey effect or whatever, but for rats.
It almost sounds like the rats are entangled. It's like the quantum.
I was just gonna say,
quantum
you could definitely say. So is that the case? And that might be the case, but we got to do our due diligence. We got to get to the heart of it.
It could be that, or maybe these similarities in human experience all across the world kind of speaks more to the fact that maybe our consciousness or self-awareness is more of an illusion, like we talked about in the beginning. Because I mean, like you see a lot of folklore that crosses cultures, although they have different names. I always bring up sleep paralysis. The sleep paralysis characters that different cultures have created are essentially the same thing. Although they have different kind of window dressing,
hag,
right? The choking ghost in Japan, but it's based on a similar experience. And we all have these experiences. We all have dreams of flying and falling and teeth falling out and wetting the bed, when things like that.
To some extent, though, on that, we're all. I mean, when you think about that, we're all Homo sapiens sapiens.
Yeah,
we're all descendant from the original group that came out of that certain chunk of Africa. And some of those things, I mean, when you look at other animals, there are some things that are instinct that, and this gets to one of those things is like, did consciousness evolve because it was evolutionary advantageous for us to survive, and just being able to be like bummed about stuff in the abstract is an unfortunate side effect. I don't know.
That's my theory on mysteries in general right now, is that the mysteries are us dangling the carrot in front of ourselves as some sort of built-in evolutionary mechanism to keep propelling, keep surviving. And, Richard Dawkins is probably the most bleak thinker on the topic, but I would make the point that there is telos or purpose to life, because just in the fact that life needs to survive or has that urge to survive, that is purpose in itself. So I mean, I think that there's something to that. I just don't, we got to keep pushing that boulder up the mountain for the next person, because we're all going to die and that boulder is going to start rolling.
We are all going to die, man.
I'm not. What are you talking about?
Upload my brain to the internet, Elon.
It's just a copy, though, right? It's like
It's
the beaming in Star Trek. They die every time they do that. It's just send my brain
to the special access program. Put me in the hangar with the sport model.
I don't care if I have to. I will ship a Theseus myself into whatever the next thing is, as long as I can keep shit posting.
Like Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah,
just like Ghost in the Shell, but with more shit posting.
Yes. Well, I mean, that was, that reminds me, though, that was the whole crux of like the first real great science fiction work, was the like emergence of true consciousness in Neuromancer at the end of that. And then they all decided to be the Haitian Yoruba deities, because that was just, I like that. That was my favorite part of that. It was just kind of the idea that AI becomes conscious, and then it's just like, what would be sick as hell is if I was like Papa Legba. Like, I'm doing that. That's my culturally appropriating this right now, because that would be rad.
Nice.
Yeah, I will say this, since having my son too, like I've always been interested in all these mysteries. I feel like I have more of a responsibility to think about it more responsibly now, so I can convey that to him, as opposed to being like lost in the sauce on it, like I just, it was okay, and I just feel like that's part of my maturity too. Like I haven't announced this, but we're going to keep doing Mind Escape. I've been on a month hiatus, just enjoying my life and taking a break after making the documentary and everything. But we're going to go in a more realistic route. We're still going to investigate all the mysteries. It's still a philosophy podcast. We're still going to interview a lot of the same people. The difference is I'm not going to bolster up people just because they're in headlines or whatever, and I'm not going to get on and say, oh, they found this and like do that whole thing. I'm just not part of that media cycle anymore. I'm just going to do what I find interesting and what I want to do, not what I feel like I should do for SEO and algorithms. And that towards the end, that's what I was doing. I'm a very competitive person, and I saw a lot of, no offense, dumber, inferior people that put out inferior products, just getting pissed off about it. And no,
it's okay if you mean us. It's fine, Mike. We can take it.
No.
It's not the worst thing that's been said about us.
You don't have to. It's not too hard, but like I have a lot of friends. We've had a lot of. I'm nice to everybody. We've had a lot of people. I promote a lot of people, but you can kind of tell by the people I don't promote. You can kind of tell by the people I don't engage with. You can tell by the people I don't interact with, and I don't do bullshit. So I'm cutting out all the bullshit. And there's people that I've held up, you know, in the fringe, whether it be the fringe, you know, ancient stuff or the fringe science stuff or whatever, that you know, some of those people are pieces of shit too. So it's going to be more it's going to be just straight talk going forward.
I'm excited for this direction that you're taking, partly because you were a huge influence on me when I started getting interested in doing my own show, and you were one of the first people to give me a chance and put me on. But one of the things, and we've talked about this a bit on this show, I'm sure you can relate to it, is basically the ethical or moral obligations we have towards the subjects we engage with, particularly during this period of basically epistemological crisis, where we're living in this like post-truth period. Like how do we talk about and engage with this subject without also simultaneously legitimizing like some of the really deleterious conspiracy style thinking?
Right.
The biggest turn for me, I read Plato's dialogues all the way through all of them probably 3 years ago. And there's something that struck me though when I reread them like a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, which was Euthydemus, which is these two brothers that are arguing with Socrates in the square, and they're making him look dumb, even though he doesn't care because he's just asking them, you know, he's using Socratic method. And the whole point of it's to talk about heuristic rhetoric. Heuristic rhetoric is rhetoric that you use to argue, but you're not after truth. So these two, you know, Dionysiodorus, whatever his name is, and Euthydemus, arguing with Socrates without actually trying to get after the truth. They were just trying to make him look dumb in front of people. And that's all the internet is. So
that's for me,
you know, people take a shit on Plato sometimes, or he's old, or he didn't know, you know, whatever, these values are flawed. Well, yeah, no shit. He lived, you know, 2,000 years ago or whatever. Things were different. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of truth there too. And I think that was a turning point for me to realize I don't want to compete with these people. I don't want to argue with these people. I don't want to deal with these people. I'm going to do what I want to do. And that's just it. And for me, you know, I love, again, these mysteries. I think there's something to the UFO thing. I think there's something to consciousness. I think there's something to psychedelics. I think there's something to the paranormal stuff. I think there's something to all of this. I don't know what it is. I think these are all metaphysics for a reason, because they're beyond the scope of our current understanding and observation. That's why they're all interesting to us. But again, I'm not going to just say crazy shit to get likes or clicks or whatever. I'm going to, if I don't make a cent from this, you know, I don't really care. It's all about truth.
Yes. So we're getting to the bottom of the hour. Before we wrap up, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your documentary, where people can find it, what it covers, what it's about.
Yeah. So Leah's in it.
Yeah, we talked about that already.
Oh, you did? Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I was getting off work when you guys were probably just starting. So it's called, basically, hold on a second. It will be premiering at, I'll get in trouble if I don't get this right. It will be premiering at the Roswell Film Festival, June 30th to July 2nd. And it's at the movie theater there. I'll get the information. I don't think I have it right here. Hold on a second.
This is the Roswell, New Mexico Roswell.
Yeah, so my buddy Toby, who works at the Roswell Daily Record, which is most famous for reporting the initial Roswell crash, he's putting on this film festival where, he's got this Maximo, this guy from Argentina that they're connecting with, and they're getting all these different filmmakers from across the world and stuff like that. So it's going to be really cool, and it's all on the UFO and paranormal topics and stuff like that. We already premiered our documentary at the event at the UFO Expo. That was 2 months ago. We won an award, which was very, very unexpected and very nice. And in terms of what we do next with the documentary, I'm just trying to think.
First of all, what's it called?
You tell everybody what's it called.
I always remember the tagline of from UFOs to DMT, as within, so without. From UFOs to DMT. Yes. So you actually. I forget the first part because we talked so much about what to call it at one point.
So I had a different title. This is the story. I had a different title. I had the experiences from UFOs or UAP to DMT. And then that whole thing happened with Saucer Co. and they started like suing people and having people take anything that had UAP on it. So I'm like, oh shit, I'm making this documentary. I don't want to deal with this. What if we want to make merchandise? What if we want to make a t-shirt or whatever? I don't want to deal with this at all. So then we had to at that point we were still editing the documentary, so it wasn't that big of a deal. So I'm like, I got to come up with a new name. And I was on a family vacation and we were in Florida, and I was just like kind of swimming all day, just thinking, meditating. And then I texted Leah like 5 options, and I had one in mind, and she picked the same one out of the 5 that I was like leaning towards. So I kind of just went with that one because I felt like it did convey, which is as within, so without, which is not part of the original, Hermetic or Emerald Tablet thing, but it's an interesting aspect of it nonetheless, and it conveys the UFO thing to me, which is that it has to do with consciousness, as within, so without, in terms of, most people as above, so below would make more sense because it's a UFO, but I disagree. I think it's as within, so without, and from UFOs to DMT. And yeah, it's a, so I don't want to go too much into it, but just the backstory behind it. Like 3 years ago, we were going to make a documentary, our first documentary on near-death experiences. My mom had a traditional near-death experience. We had tons of people on our show so far. One guy had 2 real near-death experiences. He had a heart transplant, like all sorts of stuff. So we had all that stuff like lined up and information, everything. But then the pandemic hit. So then we're like, oh shit, we can't fly everywhere and see everybody. What are we going to do? I saw my buddy Chris Wolford post something about how he's never told his story fully, and at that time I was in between being interested in the government stuff, but starting to lean more towards experience because I didn't feel like there was much to the government stuff. I feel like most of the good info lies within the experiencer aspect of it. So, and Chris is a Detroit guy. I'm a Detroit guy. It just kind of worked out. So we just linked up and we just started snowballing ideas, and he was cool. He's like, I just want to tell my story and you guys do whatever you want, with the rest of it. And I had the idea, well, what kind of crossover do we have? Because it's all about consciousness. And I've had entity experiences and UFO experiences and psychedelic experiences and altered states of consciousness. What's up? Sorry, my cat's freaking out. And I've had all sorts of weird experiences and stuff like that. So like, what can we do? So then I thought, okay, well, Leah can speak to this, but there's Dr. Andrew Gallimore, who's written the book Alien Information Theory. There's a lot of information on DMT. I know a lot about psychedelics, and I've had weird UFO/alien experiences on psychedelics. I just felt like that was something I could speak to through other people and ask questions that I felt like could evoke, almost using the Socratic method, could get that out of people. So that's kind of what I did. I just asked questions where I felt like I would get a general answer based on what I already knew about these people. So, I mean, I didn't train anybody or change or manipulate anything. It was just hey, I know this person's story kind of, and I just kind of, we pieced it from there. So bottom line is, I believe that there's a connection to consciousness and UFOs. Obviously, that's what we've been talking about. I also believe that there's a connection between psychedelics and whatever this weird other thing is. And then the other nail in the coffin was, while I was making it, True Hallucinations kept popping back up in my feed, and I had read that book multiple times. And if you know what True Hallucinations is, it's Terrence McKenna and Dennis McKenna going all throughout Colombia, and then they end up, trying to find this. It's basically like an orally active DMT paste that these indigenous people in Colombia create, and the whole thing is basically about UFOs and psychedelics and altered states of consciousness, and trying to bring that out in some sort of way and figure out what's going on. If you've ever heard Dennis McKenna talk about the experiment at La Chorrera, that's the most interesting aspect of it to me. So I don't want to ruin it, but yeah, the La Chorrera thing, and I've had my own weird experiences. It just kind of all came together. So I'm not saying that psychedelics, will put you in touch with aliens or whatever, but we're on Twitter all day long talking about aliens. Everybody's wondering about aliens, and here's this whole section of people that do psychedelics regularly, psychonauts and stuff, that claim to be talking to aliens regularly. Let's investigate this. So that's kind of what the documentary is. It's a combination of the UFO experience with the DMT experience, and then some crossover. Is there a bridge? Is there not a bridge? One thing I will point out that's very, very fascinating. The people that I know that do a lot of psychedelics have had UFO experiences outside of psychedelics. And then there's also people that I know that have never had a UFO experience that have had UFO experiences within psychedelics. It's also interesting that when people experience these things, they'll experience entities, but they won't experience the typical saucer UFO, which I find fascinating too. So what's going on there? Why certain aspects in certain realms and not other aspects in other realms? I don't know. But that's just part of the mystery just starting to unfold. Yeah. And again, it's, this was a passion project. So a lot of the footage I had, sent in from everybody. We did go out to Chris Wolford's farm and shoot everything with like a drone and everything like that. And everybody else was kind enough to just send in their footage, because again, it was during the pandemic. So, but yeah, that's kind of the spiel about it. And if anybody wants to see it, it is available on our Patreon. You can go to mindescapepodcast.com, or you can go to our link tree. We're on all platforms. It's available. The director's cut's available for $7.77. We are going to release a way more edited version that will be shown at that film festival. And we might, after it airs at that film festival, we might put it up on YouTube for free, but it'll probably be a lot shorter than the version that's up for the director's cut. So
love it.
Nice.
But yeah, thank you. Thank you,
great.
Leah, for
Of course.
participating. Yeah, sorry if I sound like a big fucking weirdo, but
oh, you are also a
Don't
fucking
worry.
weirdo.
Yeah,
This is like you fit right in.
last thing you have to worry about.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thanks so much for making time to drop in. Love what you do on Mind Escape. Always happy to support you in any way. And of course, we'd love to have you back anytime you want to jump in.
Yeah, I'm down. And of course, you're welcome on Mind Escape, and both of you are welcome on us, anytime as well. We're just an open forum like this, just to have interesting conversations. So.
Awesome.
Beautiful. All right, Mike, I'm going to kick you off the stream. Take care. Have a nice night.
No.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to wrap up the show. Next week is the 21st. I am not going to be on the show. I'm going to have the night off. So we'll see if we actually even move forward with anything. TBD. I don't think we have anyone scheduled.
I don't think so. I mean, we could always do a roundtable or a call-in or something.
Yeah. Campbell has demonstrated himself to be an excellent host in my stead when I'm away. I loved his apologetic Leah. I made the introduction less woo and more rational when I did it, and I said that was totally fine. I said, hey man, like,
we're gonna figure out what paranormal championship wrestling looks like. I'm thinking kind of like a CCG, like EFED kind of thing. We'll make a game out of it.
I don't know those acronyms you just used, but I'm interested in this.
The CCG is the collectible card game, like your X-Files.
Oh, CCG. Right? I think you said ECG.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Oh, I know about some CCGs.
Electrocardiogram, dude.
For sure.
Yeah, we're going to figure out what that means.
Yeah, man. I'm trying to get in. My cat's name is Kodo, which is named after a German pop song by Doof. Should look it up.
Of course. How silly of me.
Mm-hmm. I want to mention, I just got this in the mail. Estimate of the situation. It is the National UFO Historical Records Center edition.
Where, incredible! Yeah,
very cool. Very cool.
This actually arrived
really
like
good,
a
right?
week ago, and it was put on the wrong shelf down in the where all the packages go in my building. So I didn't realize it had been here for a while, but I'm really excited about this.
We had Tom Orzechowski. There we go.
Yeah.
On the show.
A little while ago.
Probably, a couple months ago. He's an amazing guest. This is a huge work of passion. He's super talented, both in his writing and research and in his art. I can't wait to hear what you think of it after you've read it.
Yeah, and the art, it's got like almost a Bill Sienkiewicz vibe. Am I saying that right? He did. Yeah, maybe he did stuff for like Marvel and DC back in the day.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I like a lot cleaner lines too, which I appreciate. So like, I'm digging this already. Also, I noticed at the beginning of the show, people were saying like, "Oh, don't store your records horizontally." This is actually UFOs in Michigan: Where to Find Them by Cheryl and Linda Costa.
Hell yeah!
Well, that's nice. I keep intending to get the one for Ohio.
Mm-hmm. My mom.
God, I gotta.
And then
this is awesome.
I am going to build a Wilhelm Reich style cloudbuster and shoot one down, and then we'll have
shoot them
live
down.
stream it on the internet.
Shoot them down.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, that's what he thought. He thought they were crop dusting us with negative organoid.
Oh yeah.
And he was just gonna.
Dude, Wilhelm Reich kind of fucking rules. Like once you get past all the woo orgo stuff, like he's a pretty cool guy.
I'm a big Wilhelm Reich guy.
Yeah, me too. He's great.
Yeah.
Shoot him out of God's airspace.
I got yelled at about that. I tweeted that, and John Tenney was like, "Do not," and I'm like, "See."
Sorry, John.
Pew pew pew.
You guys up to anything else?
I got a long weekend.
I'm still working through The Trickster and the Paranormal. Cool. And then I also started a very close rereading. So, unfortunately, he has been canceled for having very bad old white guy opinions about trans and gender identity. Yes, but I was going to say, behind the scenes, I'm doing a fairly close rereading of Communion and plan on reading kind of the other books in that
Night
milieu.
Church.
I was going to read like Transformation.
Check out Rob Christopherson's shows on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely will. I definitely will. I'm trying to do a deep dive into Whitley, understand more of his work, especially now that, look, when I first read Communion, I was working at the Body Shop as a makeup artist, and I was 16 and working Saturday nights, so I'd read behind the counter. I was like, obviously in a completely different experience than I am now, with some of the like broader knowledge of spiritual emergence and perennialism and stuff. And so it's kind of interesting to go back and revisit Strieber's work with a more informed lens about these kinds of experiences that he reports.
I think you should slip in one of his
that doubles down on everything. All right, go ahead.
You should put one of his fiction books in there while you're reading those, and you should kind of do a compare and contrast. In fact, you were challenged to do so. The Night Church. You a couple months ago, you were challenged to read after you made comments on this show about Strieber by your number one fan, Martin Kottmeyer.
Oh, Martin! Yes, I love Martin Kottmeyer, and I will happily read Night Church, and then I will slide into his DMs. We're actually friends on Facebook. I will slide into his DMs and say, Mr. Kottmeyer, I have this weird little show on Wednesday nights. We'd love to have you join us.
the creative. Oh yeah, I'd love to get him on. The creative mind that wrote Night Church, he says, is quite capable of coming up with the experiences written about in Communion.
Yes.
So let me know how that goes.
Of course.
Last time we talked.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I am going to go through and read all of the old Groom Lake Desert Rats that I downloaded off of
AFU.
Yeah, I downloaded them off the our Internet Archive.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, because you're not hosted anymore, and I just kind of want to go. I'm working on kind of like trying to get my mind around a larger historical timeline for some of the stuff that we're experiencing coming back now, and go back and read some of his stuff about Bob Lazar as it was happening, and the J Rods and stuff. And I am still, even though it's a really short book, it's like an essay, I'm still working through Sex Secrets of the Black Magicians Exposed.
Oh,
I
just packed this tonight.
Okay. Which is not about any of that, really.
Right.
Yeah, I've talked about that when I was on before. That's been really philosophically informative. But I feel like I have to read a bit and digest. Just kind of let it sit. Yeah.
Yes. That's like how I feel about The Trickster and the Paranormal. I feel like I'm going to be reading that book, not only forever, but it's basically going to give me an ever-expanding list of other books that I need to read.
Oh, the bibliography. The bibliography is like this much of the book on the back. Yeah, it's not insignificant.
What about you, Nick?
Yeah, what's up?
How was your X-Files?
Last time I talked to you guys, I said, I won that game. It was really fun. It had been 10 years since I played it, but it all kind of came back to me. So super fun. I think more people should check out that game. There's, it's a limited amount of sets. It's not a lot to learn, like if you get a magic or something like that. And it was live streamed, Studio Sequim on YouTube. My game's live streamed. You can see my epic win on there. I solved his X-File. It's cool. It's a super fun game, and those guys, that community around that game, kind of maintaining it and preserving it, are all really cool. Like I just joined up with them pretty recently, and they're all just cool people. So awesome. I'm doing that. I'm going to be reading that. That's it.
Beautiful.
Anything else?
Nice.
Going to sleep.
Yes. Got a long weekend coming up. I might actually clean up a little bit. So.
Nah.
It's a disaster. That's the big reason I have the Starfield. Is it's just a disaster.
I've always wondered what was behind there.
That's books on the floor, but they're starting to form like drifts. Like they're forming their own like geological features. And I keep promising myself, like, I intend to read all my books. Like, unless I like die before I get a chance to. Like I fully not buying them because I have like bibliomania or anything. But I'm like, I'm not going to buy any more books. Then I bought Saucers and Spooks because of all the discussion lately. And I bought, hold on, what did I have coming? Because I'm really practicing serious self-deception on this. I got Saucers and Spooks coming. I've got Trans Mediums and New Media, Spirit Possession in the Age of Technical Reproduction coming.
Wait, what's that called?
Trans Mediums and New Media, Spirit Possession in the Age of Technical Reproduction.
That sounds interesting.
God.
Yeah, that should be a good one. I've got How to Contact Space People coming. Again, shoot them down.
Yeah.
Really. And then I'm got the used copy of the Cybernetics of Creation with the cool cover coming.
Cool. Beautiful. Because
I still trying to wrap my head around the whole pennyroyal thing, where all the guys think this is cybernetic phenomenon. All the phenomenon is kind of corresponds to the laws of cybernetics somehow. Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful.
Exactly.
All right,
gentlemen, it's that time.
It is. Good night.
Have a nice night.
Good night. If I don't talk to either of you on Friday, happy Picard Day.
Thank you, sir.
Happy Juneteenth next week.
Yes, next Monday.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, we'll be back soon. All right.
Cowabunga, man.
Cheers all. Bye.